Archaeologists cracked open a 2,700-year-old wooden box buried under a temple in Israel. Inside, on a stone altar, was a dark brown residue that had been sitting there, undisturbed, since the time of the ancient kingdom of Judah. They ran it through a chemical analysis. It came back as cannabis, mixed with animal dung to keep the burn slow. Controlled release. Whoever placed it there knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't an accident or a curiosity. This was a ritual. The story of humans and cannabis is about 12,000 years old. The story of humans trying to pretend that relationship doesn't exist is about 90. Let's start at the beginning. Somewhere in East Asia, around 10,000 BC, humans were just starting to figure out farming. They were looking at wild plants and asking the most ancient version of a practical question: what can this do for me? And one plant answered that question in almost every direction at once. You could twist its fibers into rope. You could weave it into fabric. You could eat its seeds for protein. You could press oil from it. You could burn it and breathe the smoke and feel the world soften at the edges. That plant was cannabis, and once humans found it, they never really let it go. One of the earliest written records of cannabis as medicine comes from the Pen Cao Qing, a Chinese text traditionally attributed to the Emperor Shen Nung, one of the legendary founding figures of Chinese civilization. The book recommended cannabis for joint pain, malaria, and a list of other ailments. This is a document that people were already treating as ancient history when Rome was being founded. Cannabis wasn't new then. It was already a tradition. From China, it moved. Merchants on the Silk Road carried silk, spices, and somewhere in the cargo, cannabis. It crossed the Pamir Mountains into Central Asia, and that's where things get particularly interesting. In a burial site called Jirzankal Cemetery in those mountains, archaeologists opened 8 tombs from around 500 BC. Inside each, wooden braziers, charred stones, cannabis residue. Not wild cannabis. This was far more potent than anything growing nearby. These people were sourcing the strong variety on purpose. They were heating stones, laying the plant on top, and breathing in the smoke while they conducted funerals. They were hotboxing the burial ceremony 2,500 years ago. And apparently that was entirely standard practice. Around the same time, a Greek historian named Herodotus was traveling through Central Asia and fell in with a group of nomadic warriors called the Scythians. The Scythians were not people you wanted to fight. They rode horses, carried short recurve bows, and were considered one of the most effective military forces in the ancient world. They were also, Herodotus discovered, extremely devoted to their smoke sessions. He watched them construct small portable tents, toss cannabis onto heated stones inside, and sit in the smoke until they were done. He wrote it all down with the careful attention of someone who couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. His exact words: "It smolders and sends forth such fumes that no Greek vapor bath could surpass it." The Scythians howled with pleasure. Historians assumed for a long time that Herodotus was exaggerating, as he occasionally did. Then in 1947, a Soviet archaeologist named Sergei Rudenko excavated frozen tombs in Siberia sealed in permafrost for over 2,000 years. Inside, tent frames, heated stones, cannabis seeds, exactly the scene Herodotus had described. He wasn't exaggerating at all. In 2013, a Scythian tomb in the Caucasus Mountains turned up containing solid gold cups. When researchers analyzed the residue inside those cups, they found cannabis and opium. Ancient warriors doing substances from solid gold. There are worse ways to end a campaign. Back in Israel, around the same century, whoever was preparing the altar at Tel Arad wasn't just burning cannabis casually. They had mixed it with animal dung to control the combustion rate, to produce a steady, sustained release of smoke rather than a quick burn. That is technical knowledge. That is someone who had experimented, refined, and figured out the optimal method. This was a practice, not a discovery. The reason cannabis kept appearing in sacred contexts, in temples, in burial rites, in royal ceremonies across cultures that had no contact with each other, is partly biological. You were already wired for it before you ever encountered the plant. Your body produces a molecule called anandamide, named from the Sanskrit word for bliss. Cannabis produces a compound called THC that binds to the same receptors as anandamide, like a second key cut for a lock your body already installed. When ancient people burned this plant and felt the world change around them, they weren't breaking into a foreign system. They were accessing something their own nervous system already had the infrastructure for. which goes some way toward explaining why, in India, they weren't just using cannabis. They were worshipping it. India's relationship with cannabis is older than most of the world's major religions. The Atharva Veda, one of the oldest surviving sacred texts anywhere on earth, lists cannabis as one of 5 sacred plants. Shiva, one of the central figures in Hinduism, is associated with bhang, a drink made from cannabis leaves, milk, and spices. The mythology says that after Shiva drank a poison capable of ending the world, it was bhang that brought him back to calm. People still drink it during Holi and Shivaratri today, the same preparation 3,000 years later. Meanwhile, in China, around 200 AD, a physician named Hua Tuo was doing something no one else in the world had managed. He was performing surgery with his patients, feeling nothing. He mixed cannabis with wine, gave it to people before he operated, and cut. This was 1,800 years before modern anesthesia. He called the mixture mafesan. The formula was precise, the dosage calibrated, the results documented. This was not folk medicine. This was systematic clinical practice, developed through observation, tested through repetition, and refined until it worked reliably. The man was operating 1,800 years ahead of what European medicine would manage. Then Cao Cao, the most powerful warlord in China, summoned him as his personal physician. Hua Tuo wanted to go home, to treat ordinary people. Cao Cao considered that refusal an insult. He had Hua Tuo arrested and executed. In his final days in prison, Hua Tuo tried to hand his medical writings to a guard. The guard refused, too frightened to take them, so Hua Tuo burned everything, every formula, every method, every record of what he had figured out. The precise composition of mafesan has never been recovered. The formula died in that prison cell. Then there is the story that sounds like it was invented but wasn't. In Central Africa, in the Congo Basin, a tribe that had been organized around warfare encountered cannabis and made a decision nobody expected. They stopped fighting. They reorganized their entire society around the plant, renamed themselves the Bena Riamba, the Sons of Hemp, and declared their territory Lubuku, which means friendship. Their standard greeting became Moyo. Moyo was a single word that meant both hemp and life simultaneously, because to them, the two things had become the same thing. A tribe that had been built around conflict rebuilt itself around a plant and called the result friendship. That actually happened. By the time Europeans were crossing the Atlantic in the 15th and 16th centuries, cannabis had been a structural material for European civilization for hundreds of years. Hemp fiber was used for ship rope, rigging, and sails. The age of exploration was physically held together by it. When colonists arrived in the Americas, they brought hemp cultivation with them the same way they brought wheat. It was infrastructure, not ideology. It spread through the colonies quickly. It spread so quickly that the Virginia Assembly eventually made growing it mandatory, not requested, not incentivized, required by law. That is how central it was considered to be. For 2 centuries, cannabis was simply part of American agricultural and medical life. Tinctures appeared in pharmacies under names like cannabis indica extract. Doctors prescribed it. Farmers grew it alongside corn and tobacco. It was listed in the United States Pharmacopoeia from 1850 until 1942. Nobody considered it controversial. Then, in 1930, a man named Harry Anslinger was appointed head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics and spent the next 32 years systematically dismantling that entire relationship. Anslinger connected cannabis to Black Americans, to Mexican immigrants, to Filipino communities. He claimed it caused violence and insanity. He kept a personal file called the Gore Files, fabricated police reports linking cannabis to crimes. He consulted dozens of doctors, most of whom said cannabis was not significantly dangerous. He discarded their answers and found the one who agreed. He dropped the word cannabis entirely and pushed marijuana instead, because it sounded foreign and threatening, and that was precisely the whole point. He personally targeted Billie Holiday, not for drug offenses, but for performing Strange Fruit, a protest song about lynching that made powerful people uncomfortable. The drugs were the pretext. In 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act passed. In 1970, Nixon classified it Schedule 1, alongside heroin, defining it officially as having no medical use and high abuse potential. Years after Nixon left office, his domestic policy chief, John Ehrlichman, gave an interview in which he explained the logic plainly. The Nixon administration, he said, had two enemies: the anti-war left and black communities. They could not make it illegal to be against a war or to be black, but they could associate marijuana with one group and heroin with the other, criminalize both heavily, and disrupt those communities at will. That is not a theory. That is a direct admission from the architect of the policy. In 1988, the DEA's own administrative law judge, Francis Young, completed a 2-year review of the medical evidence and concluded that cannabis did not belong on Schedule 1. He formally recommended reclassification. The DEA rejected the recommendation and changed nothing. Cannabis has been part of human civilization for roughly 12,000 years, federally illegal in the United States for about 90. Less than 1%. For nearly all of recorded history, this plant was simply a material, a medicine, a ritual object, a fiber crop, a feature of daily life in cultures across 6 continents. A tribe in the Congo built a peace around it. A surgeon in Han Dynasty China used it to cut people open painlessly. Warriors in frozen Siberian tombs took it into the afterlife. A shaman in the Taklamakan Desert was sent into the next world with almost 2 pounds of it because the people who buried him wanted to make sure he had enough. They didn't know about scheduling or political strategy or the specific anxieties of 20th century American law enforcement. They knew the plant had been useful. They knew it had been useful for longer than their own history could account for. It kept showing up in the medicine, the temple, the burial, the rope holding the ship together. That seemed like reason enough. It still does, which is why the last 90 years look, in the full arc of that 12,000-year story, like a very brief interruption,